Welcome back to a 2024 Senate prediction. Today, talking about all the latest polls across these battlegrounds, as well as the ones that people don't really talk about. And we're going to get right into it. Now, you can see that I have the vast majority of the states colored in, and about a third of the 100 seats in the Senate are up for election every other election year. Obviously, we do have a 2018 rerun when it comes to the Senate map, and it's a brilliant one for the Republican Party. As we all know, in the blue wave, the Republican Party actually picked up 3 seats in 2018. And so, for that to be the case again in 2024 with a more favorable general election prospect, we're going to fill this in concordance with that. Now, also, another corollary I wanted to point out is that when it comes to the general election, of course, it's not the exact same thing as the Senate one, but we do have to consider the fact that in 2018, Trump was on the back foot, and today now he's leading in the polls when it comes to the popular vote. And so that's one important consideration there. Among other things, we do have the battlegrounds that are looking very favorable to Trump. And again, we're talking about an election where people are going to be voting 95% of the time for either Biden or Trump. It's not going to be a question of, well, I'm only coming to vote for this Senate candidate or whatever have you. And so that's what factors into my map and my logic. And so for that reason, let's get right into the examples of where that could be wrong. And so first and foremost, Minnesota is a state that has been outperformed insofar as it's gone super left in elections ran by Amy Klobuchar. And so I think that she's going to have a great case to make that a safe blue state, no matter how close it is at the presidential level. Even if Trump were to win the state, Klobuchar still wins by over 10. There are very few elections where there's a big discrepancy between the presidential candidate, their performance, and the underballot, undergoated people. But it turns out there's a few examples where it's not the case, and there's a huge breakup. Another example of this could be Angus King in Maine, where he has about a vague 3/5 of the state voting behind him for the past couple decades, which is to show that even though he is technically an independent senator, he's more or less a Democrat, as in he gets mostly Democrats and some Republicans voting for him. And so that's a safe Democratic state. To really add on to that, we do have New Mexico as well. I think New Mexico, some people are saying is a sleeper flip, and it totally isn't by any means. In fact, when you look at the real bones of this, we have a guy, Martin Heinrich, who outperforms, I think, Democrats at the national level and really has no problems with him. I think a guy like him would easily dispose of the Dominici dynasty heir, this daughter that's running. In fact, we don't even need to look at polls, but we're going to check them anyway. So as you guys can see, as of less than a week ago, y'all noticed that Heinrich is over Dominici by 7. And even the Nila Dominici sponsored poll, which again is biased towards her, and by that I mean the Republican, you'll notice that she's only still losing by 3, which is to say that, of course, she has virtually no shot. And so hopefully the Republican Party, for their own sake, doesn't spend money on this race, because it's definitely going Democrat. And again, it should be closer than an election would be theoretically, let's say in 2018, for the same seat. But the truth is that it will not be. It's basically a fool's errand. If I were Dominici, I'd move to Arizona to have a better shot at doing anything at all. Another one that's similar to this would be Maryland. I think Maryland is difficult because for a couple of different reasons. So where the Ravens play does not have any polls insofar as the Senate race is going, which is too bad. But we do have some primary data that nobody cares about, so we're going to skip that. But I guess what you can tell is that Larry Hogan probably doesn't have a great chance for a couple of different reasons. Yes, does he have the best opportunity to flip the state that's deep blue to Republican because he was a popular Republican rhino governor? Sure, but the truth is that if you were to take that example, like, okay, have Chris Christie run for New Jersey Senate, that would not work out so well. I mean, running at all for the guy would be a problem. But I mean, even extrapolating that to Massachusetts, do you think Charlie Baker as a Republican governor could have won the Senate at the national level as a candidate? I don't really think so. In fact, when you look at other cases, again, even earlier, Mitt Romney, do you think he would have won the Senate in Massachusetts? The answer is no. And so for this to be the case is virtually impossible. I think it's nigh impossible even. I think Larry Hogan will make it closer than it ought to be in normal circumstances. But the truth is that it's a fool's errand. Like I said, some people like Let's Talk Elections and other gay folk will say, well, actually, Trump gave him the kiss of death. It's no, I mean, the guy has diabetes. He's way on his way out. Larry Hogan had no chance. And whatever Trump did or didn't do had no bearing on the final outcome of that election. Moving on, we do have Texas, which again is a pretty much a nothing burger when we look at the polls. So if you pick up on the game here, you'll notice that Cruz is winning and leading Alred as of 11 days ago by 11 percentage points, which is a lot better than he did against Beto O'Rourke. And what's also interesting about this, of course, is that beyond even the fact that you do have Alred, who apparently is going to spend millions of dollars on this race. You would think it'd be closer than it is now in terms of polling, but it's still really, really solid for Cruz, who's not a good candidate by any means. And so for that to be the case makes it all the more likely that the thing will not get much more narrow when it comes to the Senate election in 2024. I think the Trump coattails will do Ted just fine. Now, keep in mind, we do have a couple of more elections to discuss. Now, Montana is another state where a lot of other YouTubers that are more liberally biased will say something along the lines of, John Tester is a very blue dog Democrat. He's like missing a finger or something tacky and ghetto like that. But beyond this, of course, he apparently won in 2018, which is not really saying much, if anything, because Trump was not on the ballot. Okay, so again, Donald Trump is a very good candidate for Montana, which is again kind of an oxymoron considering the phenotype and everything, but still he appeals to those people. And so when you talk about Donald Trump, he's probably going to win the state in 2024 by about 20, which is to say that for about 40% of Trump voters to vote for the Democrat is just asinine. And so John Tester has literally no chance. Metaphorically, you could have the Tom Brady of politics run as a Democrat in Montana this year against the most mediocre Republican, i.e., he, or whoever you want to talk about, and it would still not be even close. And so for this to be even a discussion to be had is really stupid. I mean, it's like saying J. Cole is the best rapper. Nobody that's not on crack would ever say that. So obviously he winning by 3, I think, is a conservative poll. Again, this has not been polled meaningfully in about 3 months, and even the poll itself only had 500 likely voters, so not even 1,000 like I like for my sample sizes. And so for this to be the case is asinine. Now, all these polls saying that Tester was going to win a long time ago are completely bunk, and they're way too old to even take seriously. And so from that standpoint alone, I think Montana is a safe red state. West Virginia is another easy flip for the Republican Party. As y'all can see, the polling has not really been there when it comes to anything outside of the Republican primary. We do have one partisan election here by June 4th where Justice is winning by 33. It's a crappy poll. We've never even heard of Kaplan strategies. But the point being is that beyond even this fact, I think that it's more clear just using history and basic knowledge of the state is that West Virginia will easily vote in any Republican at all. You could have a felon still win easily. In fact, that would probably add to the appeal. Anyway, the point being is that that's a safe red state. But let's move on to Florida. Tim Scott is known for running close elections, winning by a hair, which is ironic because he has none. But I think this is going to actually be, somewhat situationally ironic because, again, it will not be within a hair, this race. In fact, it'd probably be the biggest Rick Scott political win ever, which is, again, not saying much. But I think that he would be Merskell Powell, who, again, a lot of people don't even know exists in national politics, which is too bad. I think that Scott's going to beat the Democrat by I'd say 5 to 10%. The truth is that, again, Scott is not the best candidate. He's a very generic guy. He looks like a crypt keeper, maybe de-aged by 10 years. So I don't know if he has the most appeal like Marco Rubio does in that respect, but who cares? He's going to win. And so I think Ohio's the next, or no, Virginia, actually. Virginia's not really been invested in. Now, some things are changing. We've had some clickbaity polls by the Fox News aggregator. That poll has Trump kind of tied with Biden. I don't see that happening at all. But the point being is that for the Senate, maybe some people might have a percolating interest in the race. My contention is that it's not really going to be close. Now, when we look at this most recent poll, we do have, Tim Kaine beating Hung Kao by about 12 percentage points, but this poll's bunk for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it's a small sample size of only 500 when, I like 1,000 plus. And again, it's from April, so this is about 2 months old. And so that's not ideal either. And again, so 48 to 36% is not a realistic election outcome. And so this poll's garbage. You cannot really use that. These other two are having Glenn Youngkin as the sampled Republican, which again is not even the case. And so these are, the polling isn't even there. For the state of Virginia, I think it will be blue just for a couple of different reasons. I think Tim Kaine's a capable fundraiser. I think Tim Kaine appeals to the white folk up in Nova. We're talking about the Arlington types. We're talking about Alexandria, Virginia types. We're talking about Quantico types. They're easily going to flock towards Tim Kaine by like a ratio or a percentage of about 60 to 40. So I think that's an easy prediction to make. Ohio has not really been invested in as much as I would like, but we do have some polling at least. Marist College, which has 1,100 people asked, 2 weeks ago. It has Sherrod Brown, beating Bernie Moreno by 5 points. Now, this is an underperformance relative to 2018 for starters, but two, I think this poll is completely bunk. But I guess we could put it as blue because that's the gimmick of the videos, that we're going to go off the polling for the most part. But truth is that I don't believe this for a second, okay? For a couple of different reasons. Let's start off with the fact that Donald Trump is going to win the state by about 10 to 12 percentage points. Okay, so for Sherrod Brown to somehow get like, let's say, a huge fraction, like 1 in 5 Trump voters to vote for him, is asinine. And what would the premise even be? That Sherrod Brown is voting for Biden 90 something percent of the time, and that somehow he's going to appeal to Ohio because of what exactly? So it really doesn't make sense. If this were 2004 and the Democrats weren't so contemptible by the white people in the hills of Ohio, then maybe a Democrat like Sherrod would have a better, escape plan to win re-election, whether that be through the venue of healthcare at the time or even tariffs against China, something that was a percolating issue even 20 years ago. But these things have been kind of manhandled by the Republicans, absent maybe healthcare. But even in that realm, the Republicans have just basically said, nah, we're just going to keep the Democrat policy of Obamacare and then nix the least popular aspects of it. And so it's not really something the Democrats could really hammer in with the media. And again, what's also worse for Sherrod Brown is that he's going to have less funding proportionally than he was going to have in 2018 for a couple of different reasons. One is that the Republican Party is catching up with fundraising, namely at the federal level, but even more so than that, we do have the Republican Party also becoming more cemented in the local politic of Ohio in and of itself, which percolates and kind of does a butterfly effect where even local offices are being filled up with Republicans. And so logistically, it becomes even more difficult to administer Democratic precinct committeemen to do different things. And there's a lot of little nuances to that. But let's move on and save y'all some time. You want me to move on? Like the video. Okay, now that you like the video, presumably, if not, you're a freeloader, look at Pennsylvania. As of a couple days ago, we do have McCormick losing to Bob Casey Jr. by 6 percentage points. I think it'll be a little closer than that in real life. In fact, I have Trump winning Pennsylvania by maybe 3 percentage points. And so for Bob Casey to win by 6 is a 9-point difference. I don't really see that happening. I see Trump winning by 3, Casey winning by maybe 2 for a couple of different reasons. Again, McCormick is a crappy candidate writ large. I think he already lost to Oz, and Oz lost in 22, disappointingly so. And so for MAGA Mehmet, by the way, to lose, despite being a better candidate, in my opinion, shows that Casey, a stronger candidate than whoever Oz went against, I guess Shapiro. Point is that obviously it's a horrible, horrible look for a Republican nominee to be having the name McCormick. And even beyond this, Bob Casey is a strong Democrat. He does tend to overperform the president in those elections at the national level, which is to say he has a certain appeal to the white folk. And so that's great for him. Now, we do have a Republican majority Senate already, but the point being is that it can change a lot in margin. And again, having 51 seats, it's a lot more tumultuous and tenuous of a majority in the Senate to have 51 seats than if you were to have, let's say, 54 or 55. And so that's what we're trying to suss out here. Alrighty, so Michigan in and of itself is another problem for the Republican Party. We can start off with the fact that it's an open seat, and the open seat is sometimes it's kind of dangerous to have as a phenomenon because it's not a known quantity what's going on here. Beyond this, of course, we do have polling as of a couple days ago by Emerson College that has Slotkin up by 4 or 5 points over Mike Rogers, the presumptive Republican nominee. What's incredible about this is, again, Rogers is displayed with only having 39% of the support in the poll, and so the thing is not completely furnished, obviously. If he were losing by 5, he'd have at least, let's say, 45% of the vote or something like that. And so I mean, that doesn't add up. So there's plenty of room for people to change their minds, obviously, in that poll. So you can't really take it at its word. So what we're going to do instead is take my opinion. Again, I came back from Michigan like 2 days ago. And so I actually talked to the people. I used to live there. And so I went to the house that I used to live in like 15 years ago. And I asked them, okay, so how'd you vote? And again, these are some obese white people, kind of like salt of the country, good people, rural folk. And they go and they say, you know what? We voted for Trump 2016, 20, but we voted for Gretchen Whitmer both times. And then I kind of locked in and I said, you know what? There's plenty of people like this in Michigan. The types that would see a Tudor Dixon and say, this bitch is crazy, but Trump is the necessary evil to win. And I think there's plenty of people to ticket split in that case. So while I personally have Trump winning by maybe 2 points in 2024 at the national level, I see Michigan also falling in line with that. But even more so than that in particular, at the state level, I think that Michigan, despite being a Trump state, will likely vote Democrat right now for the Senate candidate, Slotkin. The reason being, again, is because the Republicans are not the best in Michigan when it comes to political infrastructure. They don't have it lit. And even beyond this, the Democrats have a couple of advantages, such as the fundraising one, but namely the ability to harvest ballots legally in Michigan. Again, logistically really juicing up apathetic voters for the Democratic Party. There will be enough people, in my opinion, in Michigan who will vote for Trump, but also are somewhat socially liberal and will say the abortion thing kind of salted the grounds for other Republicans other than Trump, and therefore I will vote for Alyssa Slotkin, theoretically. I think that's totally possible. So it could be a Trump plus 2 state and then Slotkin by 0.5, something like this. Super liable to change. It's a very open election and race, but that's what I have for now. Then Wisconsin is also similar. As y'all can see, Tammy Baldwin has been leading all the polls as of recently. In fact, about a week ago, we had Baldwin up by 3 over Hovde. This survey is a lot better than the Michigan one, by the way, because you can see that the margins are closer to 100. It actually adds up to about 90. So again, 10% undecided. Now, 10% might seem like a lot relative to only a margin of 3 for Baldwin to be winning, according to the most recent poll. But truth is that you would need to win the undecideds that are remaining by a ratio of about 2 to 3 if you're Hovde, and that's very unlikely. So that's dubious. And so when it comes down to it, I think that if the election were held today, that Baldwin would probably win by like 1.5 or something like this. That's just the truth. That's just mathematically in line with what's happening. Again, Baldwin has outpaced expectations for the last couple of elections. Again, against not really the best candidates. I guess the best politician in her time in Wisconsin was probably either Ron Johnson, who's objectively good, but not in this race, or Scott Walker, who has hair thinning issues. So it's not the best consortium or bench here in Wisconsin. And so much like Michigan, I could see Wisconsin going narrowly for Trump at the national level, presidential, I mean, and Senate-wise going slightly Democrat, which is too bad for them, I suppose. Now, we do have 2 more states, though, and that's Nevada and Arizona. So Arizona, as we know, is a very important state for this election. At the national level, I think it's a foregone conclusion that Donald Trump will win the state, to the point where I think like even doing little ticky-tacky work for him is kind of pointless. I think he's going to win it by a lot, probably by a little bit more than he did in 2016. And again, in 2016, Trump wasn't really trying in Arizona. And so just to keep that mentality, let's see why Kari Lake is losing in the polls right now. So mathematically, the most recent poll, of course, is Lake 41, Gallego 45. And so that's a 4-point difference. Granted, that only adds up to 86% of the vote. So that's about 14% undecided. Now, there is a 5-point margin, more or less, for Gallego. And so for that to be the case, Kari Lake would have to win a vast majority, outright majority too, of the remaining vote that's undecided. And so for that to be the case is kind of dubious because, again, the ratio she would have to do it at is a little tenuous. But to add a little bit more flavor into this, to kind of get a better sample, you'll see that Gallego's up by 7, 8, 3, and 5 in the poll. So the median number here would probably be like 6.5, or if you were to average it. I think that's a little bit negative. I think that Kari Lake will probably lose if the election were to be held today, like I'm doing right now. I think she will lose a little bit. In fact, you could have Trump winning the state by like 2 to 5, and Kari Lake is still unlikely to win in that case. That's because there's ticket splitting, the predicate being the abortion clause. Basically, there's enough people in the state of Arizona and in the whole world, to be honest, but in particular America, where there's plenty of suburban moms, et cetera, that flirted with abortion in the past, had one, et cetera, that have a guilty conscience about it, which makes sense. And so for that reason, might vote for a Democrat over a Republican, even though absent the abortion question, they probably would vote for Kari. And she has statements in the past that were troubling politically, where she might have supported that antiquated law that was validated by the Supreme Court of the state a while ago and then rescinded or whatever have you. And so for this to be something that's like an albatross around the neck seemingly seems like a really ugly thing to have electorally. And so for that reason, I think that Kari Lake could very possibly lose as of right now. Things are subject to change. If Trump's lead expands, then maybe the coattails from Donald Trump will help, or maybe Kari Lake over the span of the next 4 to 5 months will be able to effectively eschew the abortion question and kind of spin it and kind of get away from it and maybe get a debate with Gallego that's favorable, but we don't know how that's going to bear out yet. We all know that the Democrats will spend a ton of money on this race, though. In 2018, they could have spent a ton of money in Texas because it was lucrative. But I think in Arizona, I think their money's better spent because not only do they actually have a chance of flipping it, but they're even likely to at this point. And for that reason, I think the Democrats will pour a lot more money into the Gallego side than Lake will get from the Trump supporters, in my opinion. So that's very bad for Kerry. Now, Nevada is probably more positive, in my opinion. As y'all can see, the polling hasn't really started in its earnest. In fact, when you look at it, you'll notice that the most recent poll has a Brown down by 12. This poll is garbage. I'm just telling you right now, it's not real. The other polls, though, are not really doing any favors for anybody. Again, they're mostly spending money as of a couple months ago on primary results. We already know that Sam Brown is most likely to go against Jackie Rosen, who in and of itself is a decent candidate, but not amazing. We saw Adam Laxalt narrowly lose in 2022. And so Nevada is very, very tricky to understand because, again, the facts on the paper show a very bad night for Brown in the state of Nevada, but I don't believe it for a second. But again, I'm trying to lend credibility to the polls a little bit. But if we do look at the election for Donald Trump as of yesterday, you'll notice that he's winning Nevada by almost 6%. And so for Brown to be losing by 12 is mathematically and statistically insanely unlikely for there to be an 18% difference. So you got to think of if Trump wins by, let's say, 5 or 6, how could Brown lose those votes and on what basis? I don't really see that happening. In fact, I see Brown underperforming Trump by maybe 2 or 3, but I don't see that being much worse. Unlike Kerry Lake, I think that Sam Brown is not as controversial, especially on the issue of abortion. Again, it's a sin city in Vegas, the most populated city in the entire state. And so for a guy to have, let's say, a Kerry Lake level abortion statement like the ones that she's had in the past would totally tank his campaign and give Jackie Rosen an easy re-election. But because that isn't really the case, I think that Sam Brown will trend upwards along with Trump in line, but also behind, but in a way that's still getting him over the finish line. And so that's all you need. Again, according to the polls, Jackie Rosen's going to win, which again isn't a crazy idea, but the idea and the premise of her winning by over 10 points is completely asinine. And I bet my left finger on it. No, actually, I'm not. That's stupid. But the point being is that I think it's going to be much closer than that either way. So according to the most recent polls, we do have a 51-seat Senate majority, which is president-proof, VP-proof. And so even if Trump were to lose against Joe Biden, which probably won't happen, you'd still have a Republican majority, which would be the first time in years. Also, keep in mind that I don't really agree with this poll, but I mean, it's the way it went today. So if it were up to me, obviously, Wisconsin would be red, maybe. Michigan, maybe red. Ohio, definitely, in my opinion. Pennsylvania, still probably blue. Arizona, probably still blue. And then Nevada would be red, in my opinion. But, tell me what you think down below. Comment down below your exact ideas for my next couple of videos because I want more ideas. I want to know what you guys want. Like the video if you want me to succeed or dislike it if you don't. And I'll see you on the next one. Adios.